Hi everyone, today I'm interviewing Rie Pearson and we met at the Women Only Wellness Gathering earlier this year. So Rie, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you for having me, Lorraine. As Lorraine says, I'm Rie Pearson. I'm the director of Women Only Wellness Limited. Well, I'm the co-director actually. And also I've got a community interest company called Be Kind, No Excuses, where we focus on raising awareness around domestic abuse in order to prevent domestic abuse. So I work with parents and I work with teenagers.
So can you share a little bit about your journey from being a police officer to becoming this advocate for abuse prevention?
Yes. Well, I joined the police in 1988.
Oh
In a
wow.
different millennium. That's a long time ago, wasn't it? I was 22, and oh, I knew nothing. I knew nothing about domestic abuse when I joined the police, and I obviously, as a uniform officer, when you join, you're dealing with domestic abuse incidents all the time, and I understand now that the police are dealing with twice as many incidents on a daily basis to what they were dealing with when I was in the police. I've been retired for 10 years, but I think my path really started. I started really thinking about it as a subject when I was working at the Gateshead Police Station. And there was a lady, Gateshead Police Station has a magistrate's court next door, and there was a lady sent to jail. And this was like 1990. And it was very unusual for a woman to be sent to jail. And at that time, it was the police did the escort from court to the prison. So there's a prison van, and the police used to drive the van. And because there was a lady going to be on the van, they needed a female officer to go on the van.
Mm.
And I was like, really? And I was the only female officer on duty. It was like 1990. There were maybe one or two police women, female officers on each shift. It's like massively different now. And I said to the boss, like, what is a woman? There's a woman going on the prison van like that had never happened. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, why? What's she done? And he said she didn't pay her television license fine. So she was getting sent to jail because she hadn't had a television license. She'd subsequently been fined for not having a television license, hadn't paid the fine. So she was fined again and then fined again. And then eventually the magistrate sent her to jail. Now, everybody knew this woman because pretty much all of us had been to the house because her husband was really abusive and there was domestic abuse incidents there every weekend, pretty much. And that woman didn't have any control over the finances in that home. She could never have paid a fine, and she had three children. And I was like, I just no, I was like, I refused to get on the van. And I got shouted at, and I got shouted at by a sergeant with a bloke. I got shouted at by an inspector, then the chief inspector, and then a superintendent. And I wouldn't get on the van because I thought, I can't physically bring myself to get on the van for this woman who's got three children, who's married to an absolutely horrible person. And I was like, what does he not watch the television? Like, but you could imagine, you can see what the process behind that would be. He would answer the door because the television license people would not. He would say, oh, our last deals with that, or words to that effect. And she ended up giving her details. So she was the one who was summoned to court, and she was the one who was subsequently in trouble. And I was just like, wow, he is so abusive. He would have the mother of his children go to jail. And even now, 10% of the women who are in jail in England, because you can't be in jail in Wales because there are no prisons for women in Wales, but the 10% of the women in jail right now are there because of television license offences.
That is
which is
absolutely
outrageous.
mm,
So that kind of put me on a path of thinking about it. And then I basically got the job down the line as domestic abuse officer, which I didn't really want. But then, when you're in a hierarchical, when you're in a pyramid scheme, you get told what to do by the boss. And I ended up doing domestic abuse, and I'm the kind of person who I'll really study something because when I do it, I want to do it really well. And that's what happened. I ended up domestic abuse, and then I was doing stuff. I was targeting. I couldn't say it at the time, but I would get the police officers in the police station where I was working to target the families where we were getting lots of calls because of domestic abuse. Because
mm,
70% of the men, and all of them were men, the perpetrators were all men, in my experience in the police, 70% of them were doing another crime. So I said, well, we'll target them for that instead.
yeah.
Which is what we did. And that kind of started me on a path. And then you see a pattern around abuse. There's a pattern, and then I wrote the book. I mean, I've been retired, so I wrote the book 5 years ago when I'd been retired for nearly 5 years, and we went into a pandemic, which was a really unusual. I mean, I probably without that pandemic, I probably wouldn't have written the book because I was too busy doing other stuff, and then kind of they enforced home and put like we were well, basically we couldn't do anything else, could we really? It was a time for development and learning for me, and that's what happened. And then here I am with a community interest company and a gathering, a couple of gatherings actually, because we do have a men's event as well.
We've got lots going on, both of us, haven't we? And
Yeah, we're
so,
both crazy, and that's fine.
yeah. So your book, Be Kind, No Excuses, it's educating people, isn't it, really? Would you like to mention some of the key red flags for people to look out for?
Well, it is really very straightforward. The speed at the beginning of a relationship, and it's the common term for that is love bombing. So wanting the relationship to get serious really quickly, and that includes pregnancy. And of course, domestic abuse can go both ways. It is massively male on female abuse, but it can go the other way as well. So, and I focus mostly on teenagers. So, make sure your daughter can't get pregnant. Make sure your son can't get anybody pregnant without his permission. Do you know what I mean? Make sure that they have those conversations and don't be sucked into a relationship really quickly. So when there's constant texting, for example, messaging it gives a false sense of intimacy when there is no real intimacy, there is no real relationship. It's all just in there. So, and that's a form of love bombing. So stalking as well. When somebody follows you, wants to know where you are all of the time, wants to know what you're wearing, wants to know where you're going, wants to know who you're with. You can be stalked while you're in a relationship. Stalking is not just about, famous people being followed by crazy people. That's, stalking can happen after your relationship. It can also happen when you're in your relationship. So they might put a track on your car. They might want to watch how much mileage you do in your car, how much money you're spending to make sure you're not spending on something else. Because essentially, perpetrator of abuse imposes their standard onto you. So they think you're cheating all the time because that's what they do. That's what they would do. And isolation. So isolation is trying to stop you from seeing your family, trying to stop you from seeing your friends, trying to stop you going to school or to college, trying to stop you going to work, or putting things in place so it's difficult to go to work and making you embarrassed, like turning up at work, having arguments at work, doing things to isolate you from your friends and family and your colleagues. So you've got the speed of the relationship, love bombing, isolation, and stalking. And if you know those things, you can see that type of behavior and what it looks like.
That's
And that's a
spot on.
start. That's a start to keeping yourself safe, but also your kids, your teenagers. Because a lot of the early type under the radar abusive behaviours appear to be caring, but really they're the start of controlling. So, for example, you go out with your girlfriends, you go to the pictures, you go to the cinema, and when you come out the cinema, the guy that you're seeing is outside, and you go, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And he'll say, "Well, I wanted to make sure I'll walk you home. I want to make sure you're safe." But really, because one, safe from who, and is he just really there because he wants to make sure that you are with who you said you'd be with, and hanging out with the people who you said you'd be with, and he's checking up on you because in his head, he's got, he's imposing his standards on to you. So when somebody accuses you of something, it's because that's what they're doing. That makes sense.
It makes a
Yeah.
really spot on sense. You basically described my ex-husband there.
And there's a pattern, because we could sit in a circle of people who've been with an abusive person, and we could have those conversations, and we know, like, oh my God, like my ex did that, my ex did that, my ex did that. And that's why you can see this, it's the three, mainly those three things. And if we can see them coming, we can close down that relationship. If you say to somebody when you first start dating them, "Look, I'm really busy this week. I've had a lovely night. Let's catch up in a couple of weeks' time." And then they start sending you text messages. That's crossing a boundary. You've told them we'll catch up in 2 weeks' time. So they're sending you messages. Now, a lot of people think that that's normal behavior, because it is for them normal behavior, because a lot of us have had that experience. And I was talking to a friend, and she had started dating somebody, and she said to me, "Look, I started seeing this guy, but I don't think I'm going to see him again because he's not really that into me. I don't think he's that into me." And I was like, "Well, tell me what's happened." So basically, she told me what had been going on, and I said, "The problem you have is every relationship you've had before this one has been with an abuse, and you've been love bombed in every single relationship. Not that you've had a lot, but 3 or 4 serious relationships, because the lady's 70 years old now, and
Yeah,
you think this guy isn't into you because he's not love bombing you, because that's normal for you, and it's normal for so many people that it's insane." Like, if they're crossing boundaries, because what they do is they cross that boundary and they see what the reaction is. It's like the Monty Python sketch, isn't it? "If you cross this line, we will kill
yeah,
you." And then they cross it. So he goes, "Oh, well, if you cross this line, then," and that's what boundaries are, isn't it? But we don't talk about boundaries. We don't teach our kids about boundaries, and they don't know about them, so they can't put them in.
exactly.
So
And
those are the conversations we have to have with parents about parenting in a, like, for me, it's like safeguarding your kid. That's just my job.
yeah, I think parents as well. And how do you think, schools and colleges, they can help more?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I would like to see the work that I do. It's the ABC course, which is self-awareness, self-belief, self-confidence, raise awareness about red flags, has those conversations. I would like to see that on the national curriculum. And I know that some schools do some form of healthy relationships, which is because we're not talking about healthy relationships, we're talking about relationships with abusive people. There is no such thing as a healthy relationship. There is no such thing as an abusive relationship. A relationship is a construct. You're actually having a relationship with somebody who's either good and a green flag person, or somebody who's abusive and a red flag person. So calling it a healthy relationship, it's like that's actually missing the point. Like, this whole government strategy at the minute is about reducing violence against women and girls by 50%. Okay, is the problem violence against women and girls? There is a problem with violence against women and girls, but actually what we need to address is those people who are violent towards women and girls, because those people who are violent towards women and girls are also violent towards men and boys.
Yeah,
They're just disproportionately violent towards women and girls, but the problem is they are the problem. Violence against women and girls is ignoring the actual problem.
Exactly. And quite often they've been abused themselves, haven't they? And they've been.
I don't think so. I don't think violence breeds violence. It definitely does not. Violence does not breed violence. But there is an issue about what children experience in the home and helping them break that cycle if that cycle is abuse. So you've got kids who come from chaotic backgrounds, and I do not want to label any teenager as abusive because that, for example, you could have a child, a teenager who comes from a very chaotic background where the background is very violent and there's a massive discussion about how you regulate emotions and how you deal with anger and other emotions that are overwhelming. Because if you put that kid in a situation, they only know how their people deal with those things. And therefore, they deal with those things in a certain way. And then you say to them, actually, that way of dealing with it isn't okay. But then you have to help them learn how to deal with things in an appropriate way. So kids from families who are chaotic and violent won't necessarily go on to be chaotic and violent. That doesn't happen, because if that were true, girls would be more abusers than boys, because it's the majority is girls who are abused. And if violence bred violence, then girls would then abuse, and they don't.
And sometimes, so maybe they're learning how not to behave because they don't want what happened to them.
It's about breaking the cycle, but I don't think there's a correlation between whether you come from a violent family and therefore go on to perpetrate abuse. There is a discussion to be had, and there are pieces of research about that. But because most victims are female, it doesn't make sense to then say violence breeds violence, because most perpetrators of violence are male.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. It's
Oh,
obvious.
I could talk about this for years. Somebody said to me, sent me a message, and she said, how long have you been doing this? And I was like, 40 years. Because it's nearly 40 years. I joined the police when I was 22. I'm now 60. So I've been working in the field of domestic
Yeah.
abuse for like nearly 40 years. And she said, 4 years? It's amazing. I was like, no, 40, 40 years. So I've got lots of stories.
It's a long time though. Well, it must be rewarding for you though, to when you see people break free
Well,
from abuse.
what is really rewarding is, like, yesterday, the government said that they're reviewing how family courts have a presumption that both parents should have contact with the child, because the family court, and not just in the UK but across the planet, is a terrible place to be. And they have said there is not a presumption for automatic contact, because things like domestic abuse, abusive people, so convicted rapists, convicted paedophiles in the family court, are still getting access to their own children. So that's been tipped over. That was yesterday. This morning, the government have announced that they're going to review the stalking legislation, because we're not getting the convictions for stalking. Now, my argument there is, well, the legislation looks fine to me. It's the interpretation and the implementation of the legislation that we need to be looking at. But when things happen like that at a strategic level, you think, oh, because everybody's campaigning to get these things done, because the court system, whichever one you're in, is horrible. It's really horrible, especially if you've come from a relationship and you've managed to survive that relationship, you've taken your children to a safe place, and the perpetrator of abuse continues to perpetrate, and the court then turn around and go, oh yeah, they can have overnight with the kids and it'll be fine, because he's a parent as well, and that's really important in these things. The stress levels
Yeah.
that the safe parents feel are literally off the chart. I mean, we did have a lady in court the other day who had a massive panic attack and had to be resuscitated by the security guard because
God.
she stopped breathing. She literally stopped breathing, and they had to ring an ambulance. And So like the stress levels, and that's, exacerbated by the system that we have. And I think the family court should just go in the bin, and they should start and rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah,
Because if you're in court for that, at least one parent is litigious, at least one parent is adversarial, at least one parent refuses to have a decent conversation, a civil conversation, a non-abusive conversation with the safe parent. So already you're in that environment where that person who's an abusive person goes, oh well, this is my stage, and I'm gonna say this, and they can say what they like. There seems to be very little checking of evidential facts, so they can say anything they like, and the court just goes, all right, that's right. Like, what? Where's the evidence?
yeah, it's certainly needs to change a lot more, and progress
Oh,
sometimes comes very slowly.
and that's the reason. The reason why I do the work I do is because it's about prevention. It's about raising awareness of stuff at the beginning, because I don't want people to have to go to court. I don't want people to have to go through a criminal trial as a victim of anything. But if they can not get into a relationship with abusive people, and in the police we would call it target hardening. So make it hard for abusive people to target the because you don't get into a relationship that becomes abusive. You get into a relationship with somebody who is going to abuse you. And these abusive people will go from victim to victim to victim, and they will literally destroy lives and produce more humans, and then try and take that tiny person whose only safe person is their safe parent, and that abusive parent will try and take that. I mean, the family court 25 years ago said that domestic abuse is a massive failing as a parental massive failing. But here we are 25 years down the line, and we're giving abusers access to their children unsupervised. Domestic abuse is child abuse. There's no way to say, oh well, that person's a good dad or a good mum. If they are abusive to the safe parent, then they are abusing their children. And I'm talking about all kinds of abuse, not just physical abuse. I'm talking emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse. Like, if you are perpetrating abuse on a person who is responsible for looking after children, that person's ability to do that job to the best of their ability is massively compromised by their anxiety, their stress levels. So it's child abuse.
It is, definitely. And your charity is supported by the festivals that you run. Would you like to tell us a bit
Yeah.
more?
So the community interest, I don't like filling forms in, Lorraine. That's like the thing. The bottom line, the bottom line is, when you've got a community interest company and a charity, you look at funding and stuff like that, and it is really hard work, and it's very competitive, and it gets more and more competitive. And so I've got the community interest company, which is Be Kind, which is domestic abuse prevention. And I went to speak when I published the book. I was invited to speak at an event which was run by Annalise Argyle, who you know. Annalise has TRAC UK, which is a charity. She works with women who are in recovery from drug and alcohol abuse. So Annalise invited me to speak at an event about my book, because the connection between domestic abuse and drug and alcohol abuse is like that, the thing.
Yeah,
I mean, when you look at, we're talking earlier about women who are in prison, 70% of women who are in prison had been in a relationship with an abusive person. And a lot of their criminal offending is linked to domestic abuse. But they still go to jail, a whole different conversation. So where were we? Yes. So I've got the community interest company. Annalise has got the charity. I spoke at the event. Annalise said that the event hadn't, like the amount of people that she thought were going to come didn't come. It was an outdoor event. very similar to our women only wellness gathering. And she was like, oh no. And it was like between lockdowns. So it was actually the first time I'd met her in person. We'd met like this online, but I met her in person. She was like, oh, it's hardly anybody come. It had rained. The main road to get to the event had been closed and we don't know why. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I had a meeting with her and I said, what about we do this? And that's how Women Only Wellness was born. So Annalise had this event and it grew off that. And I mean, gosh, it's
And it keeps,
fabulous.
yeah. I was telling everyone about it when I was at the Social Business Awards that, because
It
that's in
is
that area, it's in Hull area, Brough.
okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah, so we sort of spend the Women Only Wellness gathering is a fundraiser for the kick and the charity, but I spend more time on the Women Only Wellness gathering than I do on the kick because the funding, what the money that comes from it means that Annalise and I run the ABC course for teenage girls and their parents. Annalise does group work and one-to-one work with women who are in recovery and sometimes not in recovery. But we don't charge for that.
Mm.
So the fundraising, it means that I can still eat. And, I've got a kid in uni. So I can take a wage for running the ABC course without actually charging parents, because I think it should be on the national curriculum in the format that I've written it in. I would never call it healthy relationships. I was like, it's not about that. It's about self-awareness, self-belief, and self-confidence. Because if you can see what abuse looks like in the real, like in the book, the Be Kind book, it's 5 true stories because we all know the statistics. We know how many people die. We know how many women are this, that, and the other, and we know what's going on. But if you read the stories, you'll be able to go, oh my God, I can see that in my relationship. I can see that in my child's relationship and have those conversations with kids and parents because they're difficult conversations to have. Well, except for with my kids, I tell my kids that.
Your kids are tough, aren't they? They won't take any shit from anyone, I'm sure.
They're very empathetic adults, actually. I've got 3 kids and they're all grown ups and they're still alive. I got 3 kids to adulthood. Hey. Um,
Yay.
they're very empathetic. I've got 2 sons and a daughter, and I actually in my life, because I've got 4 brothers, I've got a son-in-law, I've got a brother-in-law, I've got numerous fabulous nephews, and I am surrounded by gorgeous men, like lovely, kind, hardworking, empathetic, just lovely men. But then my business side, I'm dealing with people who are surrounded by horrible men.
The opposite, yeah. Well, there's your balance, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. But my family, my brothers are just absolutely lovely men. My nephews are lovely men. My kids are. I'm very
yeah.
fortunate, actually. I'm very fortunate.
See the good in some people, can't you?
Mhm,
Definitely.
mhm. But then we ran the men's wellness. We did a pilot for the men's wellness in May, and it's basically the blueprint. It's the same thing. And those men a lot of them had spent time in jail. A lot of them struggling with addiction and trauma. So we need to pull that in as well.
Mm.
But if we get them when they're younger, where parents would just have those conversations with their kids, like I know it's hard conversation, but you're not there to judge your kid. You're there to safeguard your kid. It's your responsibility to make sure that your kid knows stuff. It's not down to the schools to teach kids stuff. It's down to you as a parent to do the things that parents do. And then when teachers and schools teach their kids stuff, you are there to reinforce the learning. You're not the school's not there. It's not childcare.
Mm. Mm. Some people see that though, don't they?
They
Childcare.
do, yeah, yeah. It's childcare. Put my kid in school, I'll go to work. But it's not, as a parent, it's your responsibility to make sure that your kids know about stuff and aspire as well. Aspire, make my kids. There's nothing that they can't do. Like I was like, you can do it if you want to do it, do it. But it's, I'm like, it doesn't matter, just go for it. And if you fail, at least you tried. And if you're always, I look at life, every circumstance I'm in, I look at life as a learning process. So if I'm in the court, if I'm in the supermarket, if I'm driving, I listen to Audible. I love Audible. Everything I do is a learning process, and I take from life what life offers me. And it's like expand your mind. Don't think that you can't do something, but do some research, find out, see what it means. Life's exciting.
Yeah, and I look forward to calling you doctor.
Yeah, it'll be a
Yes.
little while yet. I quite like that as Dr. Rie. I'll be called Dr. Rie, but I will do it. I will definitely achieve that. You can hold me to this, like, what's the date? 22nd of October, 2025. You can hold me to it.
Yeah, 5 years. Or less, maybe.
Maybe. We'll see how it goes.
So if people want to reach out to you, where's the best place to contact you?
Well, riepearson.com is my website. And the reason for that is when I started the website, I had written a book. I didn't know what a community interest company was. Somebody said to me with all the stuff that happened, well, you need to set up a community interest company. And I said, well, I would, but I don't actually know what that is. So I've had to learn. I've got a business by accident. Women Only Wellness is womenonlywellness.com. Wait, if you search me on Google, Rie Pearson, you'll see, the Instagram pages, Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
And
So
I've got quite an unusual name, so yeah, you'll find me.
yeah, there's not many of you. You're not Smith, are you?
No, definitely. There are two Rie Pearson um Facebook because what happened was they closed one down. I don't know why they did it. They kicked me off Facebook, so I set up another one, and then they switched it back on after about 5 months, and I can't get on it. I can't get on it to switch it off. So it's there, but you'll eventually, if I don't answer you, it's because you're on the wrong one. But I'll always answer. I always answer.
Yeah. And I'll put all the links below the video as well. So any final thoughts or words of wisdom for the viewers?
Oh gosh, be true to yourself, and conversation is vital. Don't take anything off the table. Talk about everything with your kids, especially, if you've got little people, like little people, if they can come to you and when they've got something that's a little problem, and you deal with it, they will come to you when they've got a big problem when they're big. So make sure that those, never shut them down. Never make the conversation about you because, as a parent, as a carer, it's your job to make sure that they're okay.
It is. Well, thanks very much. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again next year or
Thank
maybe
you. I am so excited. Something happened at the weekend. I am so excited for the wow. There's something happening. I'm not telling anybody. It's a treat. Um, but I will put that out at some point, and everybody's going to go, I'm definitely coming. Because
yes.
next year we're going to have like 160 workshops over 2 days.
Oh, excellent.
Every woman needs a woman only wellness gathering. And remember, it's open to girls from the age of 12 because the importance of feminine connection should never be underestimated.
And especially at that age as well, when you're going through lots of changes,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
good. Great.
definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.